Hello guys, and welcome back to the fourth video. In this video we're gonna start looking at creating the setting up the instancing themselves now that we have converted all the VDB files into an S file that we can use with the instancing with Arnold instancing. So I'm gonna create an instance node, and I'm gonna switch to the second camera I have, which is cam full, and it has an animation, so I'm gonna go to frame 100 and dive inside. I'm gonna create a grid, and a grid of this size, and now we have a grid that we're gonna use for the instancing. And I'm gonna create a simple scatter and just add some points. And I'm gonna go back to the object level and go to the instancing tab and select cloud bed 1 and change it from point instancing to fast point instancing. And we can see already that we have a preview of the cloud bed. So I'm gonna hit render, and we should see the rendering. Sorry, I'm gonna name this correctly and hit render. Cool. So now that we have instancing set up, we're gonna tweak it a little bit and add a variation. So we picked the three different, we have randomization on which one we're gonna pick from these guys, and then we're gonna add scale, rotation, and translation. So I'm gonna dive inside and I'm gonna close this, and first of all I'm gonna subdivide the grid a little bit more, so we have more points, and I'm gonna add a point jitter to vary it a little bit, add a little bit of noise to the surface, and I'm gonna subdivide it again. And I'm gonna scatter some points. Sorry. I'm gonna scatter some points, in this case 3000, and I'm gonna create some color variation on these guys, because I think the distribution right now is too uniform. So I'm gonna create a volume VOP, a point VOP, and I'm gonna create a flow noise and connect this to the color, and I'm gonna expose frequency, amplitude, and go back up. So now we can add more randomization to the points. And now I'm gonna create we have three different versions here, and I'm gonna create an integer that goes between 1 to 3, so 1, 2, 3, and randomly assign that number to the object, to the points I have here. So with Houdini 14 there is a new node called attribute randomize. So I'm gonna create that, and I'm gonna name my attribute selection, and it's a point attribute, and I'm gonna change it to uniform discrete, and the dimension is 1, and I'm gonna pick the min value to 1, set it to 1, and the max value to 3, and the step size is 1. So now let me call this selection setup. If I view this, we should see a value between 1 to 3 assigned randomly to the objects. Cool. The next thing I'd like to create is a random p-scale randomization. So I'm gonna create another randomize node and call it p-scale, call the attribute p-scale, and I'm gonna vary the size between I'm gonna set the variation to continuous and vary the size between 0.8 and 1.2, and I'm gonna create angle variation to vary the rotation of the different instances. So I'm gonna create another randomize node and name this angle, and the angle is gonna vary between 0 to 360, and it's of size 1. So I'm gonna set that to 3 and I'm gonna change this to angle, sorry. And this is scale. And for the rotation to work, assigning an angle will not do anything. We have to create a orient matrix, orient for float, a for float vector, and we're gonna do that using a point vault. I'm gonna dive inside and read the attribute we just created. We called it angle, and I'm gonna create a quaternion from that angle, and I'm gonna use the y-axis because I want to rotate them on the y-axis. I don't want any x or y or z rotation, and I'm gonna convert the quaternion result from rad to degree and export that as for float attribute and call it orient. And this is something that the instance knows how to work with. So I'm gonna set this to when input is connected, and now we have our orient attribute created. And the last thing that we have to create is the instance. So right now, if I go back here, we can see that we're only creating an instance object, but we can we don't have to. If we use that, we're only limited to 1, but we'd like to vary the instance between each point. So to do that, we need to create a string attribute called instance and give it the path to the object level. So just to recreate what we had before, I'm gonna paste the full path for the first one, choose .1, and then go back. So if I look again, we can see that we have the rotation scale set up, but it's only reading this. And we've created a selection attribute that randomizes that. So I'm gonna use this, I'm gonna use that number that we created to dynamically generate the path to the cloud. So I'm gonna use I2A, which converts a float to, an integer to a string, and our value is float, so we need to convert it to an integer first. So I'm gonna create an int and convert the selection. In this, if I right click, look at the spreadsheet, we can see that we're concatenating the number and the path. And the last thing I want to randomize a little bit more is the size. So right now the size is all uniform, but I'd like to take 1% of these guys and make them a little bit bigger. So we're gonna do that using a random function, and we're generating a random value based on the point number, and if that's smaller than 0.1, which is 1%, 10% of the whole thing, we're gonna scale the size a little bit more. So just to add a little bit more variation. And now if I go back, it is selecting, the instance is grabbing this, this, and this. And I'm gonna hit render and show you the result. Cool. So now we have the 3 different versions being dynamically selected. We have scale, we have rotation, we have variation, we've noised our original surface to make a little bit of variation in the height, and we can see that we can populate the whole area using cloud, and it's very memory efficient. It is using 89 megabytes right now, and we can do this in an infinite way. So in the next video, we're gonna move on to the more complex cloud that I showed, and which is these guys here. So I'm gonna show two different methods to create how I created them, but I only used one. I'm gonna show a second method that I didn't use, which uses the Houdini cloud and cloud noise node, and we're gonna instance them as well, and then move on to the we're gonna shape them first, and then in the rest of the videos we're gonna create the atmospheric effects. So thanks for watching, and see you in the next video. Bye.